Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Chris Province.
And I'm Luke Freeman. And today we are excited to welcome our guest, Mike Day from TribalHub. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So a little bit about Mike. So Mike is the founder and executive officer of TribalHub, and he's also the chairperson for nonprofits TribalShare and Tribal-ISAC. His experience includes over 30 years of leadership experience as a CIO for a large tribal enterprise in Michigan, for a multi-property commercial gaming company based in Vegas and Pennsylvania, and as a consultant to numerous tribes and tribal gaming enterprises across the U.S. Mike's the founder of TribalHub, TribalNet, TribalShare, Tribal-ISAC that we mentioned, and both the Native American Technology Research Center and the Gaming and Hospitality Research Center. As a member of multiple industry advisory boards, a frequent speaker at gaming and tribal events, and a regular contributor to industry magazines, Mike's vision and accomplishments have been recognized by many folks in the industry and publications. In 2016, he was recognized with the Lifetime Achievement Award from his industry peers at Gaming and Leisure magazine. So, I mean, maybe my first question, Mike, like one, did I miss anything? But two, I mean, do you think they gave you the Lifetime Achievement Award too early? Like you don't look that old to me.
Yeah, no, that's, I think when I exited the Las Vegas gaming market and went to focus on Native American organizations and of course, gaming and hospitality, I think that was my going away from that piece when I moved away from Vegas. But yeah, that's awesome. That's what happens when you move on in a different part of your career, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I know we have really loved our connection with TribalHub, getting to be just a small part of what you guys do to support technology leaders in the tribal enterprise space and other leaders, finance and executive leaders as well. And I'm curious if you would share with listeners, I mean, I read the bio, but just like give us the couple minutes about what is TribalHub and, you know, what are the needs that you're trying to meet?
Sure. Yeah, TribalHub, what it is the largest network of technology-minded leaders from Native American tribes. That's gaming and hospitality, that's health, that's all the government services. But the focus is on technology, which is prevalent across all organizations today. But we are the largest network of technology-minded leaders from Native American organizations. And really, what we do is connect. We connect everybody in this community to each other, and we also connect them to solutions and really just share a lot of information on things that we're not competing on, which is the vast majority of what we're all trying to do.
Yeah, very cool. And I know we've seen the benefit just of building a network as we've been involved in a few events and got a chance to connect with some of your members. And I mean, I'm curious, taking this approach from organization-based knowledge sharing, creating best practices to building a network where people from multiple organizations can kind of come and learn best practice. Tell me about that journey a little bit. You know, what kind of raised your awareness? I'm sure you could have stayed a CIO, right? You could have stayed within an organization, doing your thing, cashing the checks, right? So why move to this kind of networked, a little bit looser, lead by having influence instead of some sort of authoritative, ability to move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, I got to go back a few years to sort of talk about where this came from, to really explain that. I started out my career at working for a small Native American tribe in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right next to Canada, in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. And this was back before the Indian Gaming Reorganization Act. It was really, gaming or hospitality with tribes, small organization. there was, not a very large organization, 70 to 100 employees. I think when I started, most of them were in health or other types of services. And a lot of them were civil servants, government employees. I took that job right out of college, not really knowing what I was getting into. And that was back in 1988. So fast forward 10 years, and we had already built somewhere in there 5 Kuwaitan casinos. We owned thousands of housing units. The reservation, the land on the reservation went from some of the worst homes and some of the worst roads in that small town to some of the nicest places. But we were building all of this, and I was in charge of technology right out of college. There weren't a lot of people there. I was writing grants, figuring out gaming and hospitality, figuring out health and social services, governments, all of these things. How do you know how to do that? There was no handbook on how to do it. So we were making mistakes, and we were doing, learning as we were going along. Meanwhile, there's 570 plus tribes across the U.S., and we realized as one of the pioneering tribes in building this out, I realized we should be sure, does everybody got to do this completely on their own? Shouldn't we kind of be working together? And that spawned the idea. So it started out with me just getting a list from the Bureau of Indian Affairs of where all these other tribes, sent out a letter, say, hey, do you guys want to get together? Should we be talking about this? There's a lot of challenges. There's some good providers, not some good providers. There's some things we could all learn from each other. And maybe by working together, we could even do things better. I think I had 15 people who showed up the first year up in Little Sault Ste. Marie at our convention space. I think IBM happened to sponsor that for us to make it possible to give everybody lunch or something. And the end result was everybody said, wow, we really need to start doing this. Why haven't we been talking before? And so that group, that was 24 years ago, has grown just with volunteers and other people. That was TribalNet. And so I created the logo. It's funny. And my kids were actually stuffing envelopes that we sent out that I was telling you about on our living room floor. My little tiny twin girls and my wife and I. So that's how it started. It was just we really ought to do something, right? We should try and do this. And then it's grown just with people seeing the value in it. And it grew with, all the people wanting to volunteer and be a part of it and seeing how beneficial it was to have that. And we've added a lot of stuff that we'll talk about here that we're able to do now and how we're able to help. But it started really just saying, why are we all rebuilding the wheel? Why are we all working in complete isolation? We're doing mostly the same thing, and we're not all competing constantly, although there's a competitive level on certain things. It certainly isn't in a lot of the public systems we can buy and processes and things we can do to benefit all Native American organizations. So, long story, I guess. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea where this started from, but that's where it came from. And it was really just gathering once a year, and it's become so much more than that over the years.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about kind of your draw to taking a community approach. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but to, how do we innovate? How do we discern best practice? How do we implement best practice? I've got to think that there's something from earlier in life, maybe an influential leader or maybe something in your DNA, I don't know, that says, hey, a community approach is something that I want to take, even as a young professional in solving problems. Who comes to mind as an influential leader for you that really helped form your leadership approach and maybe your embracing of, a community approach to solving problems rather than, solo person out there in the wilds, figuring it out?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually thought about that a few times, and I think it's a variety of people. I don't know that there's one person I would call out to say this was it. This was what put this together. I'd say it was a lot of things, right? I know, just kind of knowing myself a bit more, that I just like building, right? I mean, most of the times when I moved on from doing something, it's because it's become kind of stagnant, just maintenance mode. I like to build things. I like to grow them. I like to put that together. So I think inherently I just kind of do that. That's how I'm wired. But I've learned as much from people that I really respected. I respected the life that they had. I looked at them and said, wow, these people are really involved in what they're doing. They're really trying to help out. When you're working for a Native American community, especially when we were just building these things, you could see the value that was being put together. You could see the good that a lot of these programs were providing. I really liked that. I wanted to keep doing it, and I wanted to see people not falling into the same the same issues that we were facing, or struggles, because we didn't really have a handbook of how to do this. So I'd say there was a lot of people early on that were working for the Sioux tribe that really would be kind of mentors in how they went about this and some of the things that they were doing and the good that it was producing. Meanwhile, I learned just as much from people who were really bad managers while I was doing this. I think you can learn a lot from people when you watch them doing things. You're like, wow, it's exactly what I don't want to do, right? So, we always talk about the people you learn from that are fantastic leaders. But I think if you're paying attention, you can learn just as much from seeing how not to books with a few people. So you get a mixture in growing organizations, and you figure out that these are the things that you should do and you shouldn't do. And maybe we should have more sessions about how to learn from people who aren't the greatest leaders. I don't see much of it, but honestly, I think I've seen a lot of that also. But there's a bunch of people, and I'm not going to call out any names, but I suppose on the good side I probably could, but I won't do it on the other side of that equation. But that's it. I think that's kind of been my journey.
Yeah, that's great. As you've clarified that kind of in your leadership journey, you said you've thought about this a few times. When you think about your leadership approach, or maybe we'll jump to the end first. We usually wrap with some of this conversation. We're just going to jump in here. But when you think about like the legacy that you want to leave, what words come to mind that you would hope, other people would describe your leadership approach or legacy, or the community that you build, either with the people you serve through TribalHub or even your employees and team members?
Yeah, success. Like success is what I strive for, right? I think that's a good word to put out there. And there's some terms that have been overused at times, but it's the high tides raise all ships, that type of an idea. I've always kind of liked that piece, though it's got overused for a while, so I don't really use it. But the truth is that it doesn't hurt you to help other people. It just doesn't hurt you. And far too many people, I think, and I've seen this, they're worried about what they're going to do, and they actually want other people to fail or not be as successful because it makes them feel like they're more successful. But I've never found that to be the case. Matter of fact, I don't really believe in that. What I believe is by making other people successful, it makes you successful personally, professionally, otherwise. So I've strived really to do that with my own team as much as possible. What do they need? How can I help them? How can I help them in their career and in their personal life? I'm happy to do that. How I can, there's only so many things anybody can do, but it's the same thing when I'm trying to connect people. It's to have them find success and success for their organizations. And there comes a point, some of the stuff that I'm doing now, I've liked working with Native American communities because I think it's clear to most people that in many ways they kind of got a raw deal on a few things that have happened historically. And, I don't believe in them needing a handout to do this. I think they're more than capable to be very successful by putting in the work and doing what they need to do and taking the opportunities that they have right now and really running with them. And I think they've shown that they're more than capable of doing this, and it's beneficial, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see the success they're doing, whether it's just in their own governments or in lifting up people through education programs, what they're able to do, again, in their own personal lives, and just giving themselves more clout as organizations by how they're building these things. So all of those pieces I like. So success, it's a long answer to a one-word answer. I think success is really what we try to do. And all those pieces are really driving towards, can we create more success? And I think there's been a lot of that. I love looking back at all the people that have worked for me over the years and all the organizations that we've helped with. And we see it every year. It's great to connect with people and talk about all the things and where they were and where they've gone and how they've been able to be more successful in what they've done or improve things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, you mentioned, hey, I really enjoyed development. I'm not much on life cycle management. Once things reach that point, maybe I'm not the best guy for the job. So I need to go build something else. My question is, where did you draw the courage to go like independent, start something brand new? Where did that come from? Because it's a pretty significant leap.
Yeah. So I started in when I took the very first job, I was, my entire family, I'm from Michigan. So, everybody in Michigan back in the 80s, they all worked for Ford or GM or Chrysler. I shouldn't say everybody, but a vast majority. Same thing. I was all set coming out of college to go to one of the big three, actually Ford, and had a job all lined up, would been making decent money, and decided to go work for the tribe in Sault Ste. Marie, making about a third of what I would have made. Family thought I was nuts. Everybody thought I was crazy, but there was a lot of opportunities. So it started right out of the gate. I'm like, they've got nothing going on here. We really need to do something. So I started out there, and I learned one of the things, lessons that I learned. I think this is an important piece too. I've mentioned, and I mention this a lot when I'm speaking or talking to people or doing anything with even my own team, and especially with CIOs or other people out there. It's really easy to get to the point, I call it turtling. It's where if you put your head in, right, can't get cut off. Nobody can cut off your head if you put it inside the shell. And too many leaders, and this happens a lot in any organization, it's easy to do this. Don't take the chance. Don't try and do this, because if you do, you can get your head lopped off. And I never did that. What I did find is that if you do the right thing for the right reasons, right, and you communicate, you always have to communicate. That's a big piece of it. But if you do the right thing for the right reasons consistently, people respect that, and you're able to move the needle. You're able to move the needle, but you've got to put in, it's a lot of hard work, and it's keeping your neck out while you're doing it, but you just keep doing it. And then people tend to respect it. They tend to understand they're going to get it done. They're responsible. They're dependable. They're somebody that I can trust, and trust is a big piece of it, because they're going to consistently do these things. That's a big piece, but all too often in organizations, people have families, they have other things, and their first thing is they pull inside. They don't necessarily keep driving forward or do the right thing. And their organization pays for it. I think they pay personally for it. And I've tried not to do that. In my life. And it's been, there's some pressure at times when you make the call on things that are, they're big deals, but it's worked out. It's worked out for me for the most part. So, that's it. But that's a big deal. I really believe that's a huge piece of leadership right there too. And the audience here is a lot of leaders. And that is one of the things I look for in anybody I'm hiring. I look for it when I'm working in organizations. I think it's a key factor, just having the ability to have somebody who's willing to do that. And it's a risk, but you got to be willing to take it.
Yeah, it's I really like that call out. It's the courage to fill the need, even if it means going towards the darkness, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And like being really uncomfortable and being okay with your neck still being out there. I think that's a great leadership lesson. And I think it's a way that we can all be a little more true to ourselves, right? Finding that courage to stay exposed and lean into the hard things.
Yeah, for certain. And, another piece on that I didn't learn until a little bit later in the Midwest, especially Midwest, East Coast, but especially in the Midwest, people treat their job, their position, moving a position or a job it's like a divorce or a death in the family. It's that is how it's viewed. People want to see that you want to go, I've been here 25 years. That's where it came from. That's how we do things in the Midwest. When I went out to the West Coast, I was stunned by the fact that they do not have that going on, right? They're like, well, I'm not feeling it. I think I'm going to go to another job, right? And to me, that was crazy world. But I didn't understand that the world, even in our own country, treats these types of things differently. And so on the West Coast, you would have had people who were more apt to maybe stick their neck out a few more times because they weren't so attached to this position and having to say, I've been here 15 years, 20 years, I can't possibly risk that type of a thing. And that changes how life works. It changes how organizations work. And it just became a realization. And I realized that when I'm working with organizations, either on the West or the East or the Midwest, that you're dealing with people who are going to treat those things differently, and you have to work differently with them.
Yeah. And I'm just pulling a couple threads together here, and I'll tell a quick story to illustrate this for listeners. When I was at the Michigan TribalHub regional event, an awesome memory that I have is that after the sessions of the first day, probably 20 of us found ourselves outside around a campfire. Someone had brought their RV, one of the attendees, right? Yeah. And so we all ended up out there having some drinks, standing around talking. It was cold and windy, but people were laughing and talking and connecting on things that didn't necessarily have to do with their specific role as technology leaders. Mm-hmm. And when I hear you say that, when you think about leadership and your leadership approach, you think about success, what I'm hearing is that your definition of success is not purely financial, right? That it does require authenticity and require risk. And sure, we can all go make whatever financial return we need to make. And there's 100 jobs out there, right, that could support my family in the way that I financially need to support it. But your standard for success is a little bit higher, that it does include those conversations around a fire, right? Some level of authenticity. And the theme for TribalHub, if I understand it right this year, is connection for the year. And I saw that in real time. And I'm just curious to dig into that a little bit more. When you hear the word connection, when you think about connection as an essential part of success, what do you think of?
Yeah, so connection is, a connection doesn't have to be an everyday friend, right? It doesn't need to be that. Connection, I have a lot of connections, people I could talk to. We're able to sit on this call. I could probably sit and chit chat with you because we've met a few times. I understand a bit about you, you understand a bit about me, and now we're able to talk and share some stories, right, about what's happening. So connections to me is more about the ability of two people, right, whoever they are, two or more, to be able to sit in a room and talk about something either of interest, right, or if it's business-wise, some shared challenges. And especially, that's kind of what we've been doing for a lot, is they start talking about some of their shared challenges. But the way you get that is you have to establish a bit of who they are. It's really difficult for people to talk to somebody they know nothing about or they've never met, and they're not really willing to share that. So when we're talking about a connection, we try to take that one step further. We want you to know a little bit about who you're talking to, who it is, who is that person, and then the conversation is far easier after that point. And I think when our members get together, I could pretty much go around the board and tell you something about the personal life of every single one of those people, whether it's their family or their hobbies or something along those lines, which makes conversations work better. So when you're building a community, I think those things are really important. And it's still a professional network. You're not into their business day to day, right? I don't know where their kids go to school or any of those pieces, but I do know enough about them to understand them a bit. And I think that's really important. And it really helps you, not just in, personally, but in your professional career. There's a lot of people who move around in this industry, and I can't tell you how many times we are connecting people with what's happening, where jobs are, where are openings, where do you want to be, what do you want to do? And people understand what they're looking for. And there's certain people at a certain point in their life that are great for, certain openings and other things that are happening. It's a positive experience, I think, all around.
Yeah. So before we started recording, we had an interesting little conversation about like the different role of technology for leaders today than maybe 20, 30 years ago. And I'm curious, from someone who is a leader and also in the technology space, who understands technology more than me, I'm certain, share a little bit about how do you think that relationship with leaders in technology has changed, is changing? And then I'd love to hear, where are we going with that intersection of, positional leadership for an organization and being a technologist?
Yeah, we could fill up hours with this session. We've talked about this for years. Let me attack that from a couple of things. So when people think of technology in an organization, they think of the IT department. And I think we mentioned you before when we were conversing on this, down in the nerdery, right? So that's where they're all at, propellers on their heads, right? All talking about bits and bytes and things that outside of IT, nobody really wants to talk about. But that's not the reality. I mean, that just plain is not the reality. There's lots of people who are in leadership positions that love to lead in and say, I don't know anything about technology. I hear this all the time. I'm not a technologist. I don't understand any, which is completely untrue. Almost all the time, I could ask them 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 questions, and they're going to be able to answer all of them. Mm-hmm. They're using technology constantly in their life. They are technologists now. And I think as we were talking earlier, we were talking about the fact, if you looked at, you take anyone from 20 years ago and you take any of those leaders and you have them on a Zoom meeting like we're on here, or working on their cell phone, they're going to think they are the most savvy technologist person they've ever seen in their life. They've never seen anything like it. They would be those propeller head people themselves. But relatively speaking, that's become so used in our society, and those things are such a part of it that you don't even notice. We don't even notice that we are all inundated in using technology today. But, that said, the people whose job is to continue to innovate, push the needle, are always looking at what's new and what's coming out. So I think it's relative in saying, what do you know and don't you know? We're all technologists in a way, and all leaders are. But we've had lots and lots of sessions about this gap. And, if I was drawing this out, you'd see leadership sitting on one side, or let's talk about a board, an executive board, and then IT would be sitting on the other side. And for a long time, they were trying to get a seat at the table. It was always about, how do we get a seat at the table? And the business people, as you'd call it, right, that were representing the business, which would be financial and other leaders, and maybe HR, legal folks would be there. But they didn't think there was a lot of value the IT folks could bring to the table. That's changed drastically, especially in the last year. Some of the largest companies now in the world, actually the largest companies, are all technology companies. Their boards are full of people who are in technology, who are very business savvy. And every organization has to learn the same thing. If you look at what's driving your HR department, yes, you got to have, treat your people right, but they're maintaining it all with technology systems. These are all their human resource information systems, how they're tracking things, what are they providing, self-service, training. It's all technology related. all your financial stuff in gaming and hospitality and mobile gaming and everything. It's all applications. It's all technology. You're moving the needle and you're changing how you're doing business with technology systems. So for leaders now to go, no, not me. I'm not, it's not the case anymore. Everything is about technology. And so there's a piece of it that comes in all of it. Yes, you still have to do all of the people things, all of the base things that have always had to be done, but you're really kind of changing the game with technology. Hard to find a part of any organization that's not being driven by that. So I think that's where the change has been, and we're seeing more people who are leading technology departments that you don't have to be somebody who started out programming and coding. That's not a requirement. The requirement is, how are you managing your people? How are you able to see what's coming in the future and talk about some of the things that are happening? How are you able to lead and do all the project management for all of these divisions of your organization and bring all of those teams together with a shared vision of how they're going to use new innovative things moving forward? Very little of their time, anybody who's leading a technology team is actually spent doing anything that you would call, really deep technology. It's not. It's all about leadership.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, I love your point about how we're all technologists. I'm sitting here and I have my USB webcam and my USB podcast microphone and my AirPods and 2 screens and my phone on a wireless charger. And before we hit record, I used a remote on my phone to turn my air conditioner off so there wouldn't be noise. And at the same time, that sure, 10, 20 years ago, someone would look at me and be like, oh my gosh, like what a geek, what a nerd, so wired. At the same time, I'll just say as a principal at Purpose and Performance Group, sure, I use these tools every day, but I don't know if I have a methodology that I use or that's a second language to me to be able to say, how do I leverage technology to extend my value proposition to more people, to fulfill my mission and my purpose more effectively as a leader of this organization. So I'm curious, for those leaders out there who they know technology is a piece of their daily operation, but they haven't necessarily brought leveraging technology into a regular strategy development cadence conversation. What kind of tips, tricks, approaches, questions would be helpful for them to think through, do you think?
Yeah. So again, this is a bit of a loaded question again, because there's two pieces to this, right? So if you're the leader of the technology team, it is part of what you've got to do. Just like, if you're the CFO and you don't know all of the new accounting rules and what's happening, well, you're not a very good CFO, quite frankly. You have to know those things, right? You got to stay up to date on them. If you're in technology, you have to stay up on new innovations, new technology, what's happening, the possibilities. So here it may not be regulated. It's about possibilities. What can I be doing? What should we be looking at? What are the possibilities? The flip side of that, though, now is these are possibilities. They're not necessarily we have to put them in place. So now when you're looking at the leaders of whether it's your hospitality or your casino, different various areas in your casino, or even various divisions within it, whether it's human resources, other places, it has to become a part of every one of those positions that they stay up to speed with what's occurring in their specific area. And then it's really a partnership between the technology team and those leaders to then drive that to the benefit of the business. So nobody is going to know HR better or shouldn't know HR better than an HR leader. No one should know accounting better than the accounting team. Nobody should know legal better than the legal team, and so on and so forth. The technology team needs to not only be supporting that, but helping them drive that and bringing a cohesive plan for the organization. So really it's about, how do I make this cohesive? How do I have a strategy for who we're going to be and what we're going to do as an organization, and make sure that we're not buying, and trying to implement a bunch of divergent technologies that don't work together? How do I put this all together across an entire organization? So the skill set is far beyond the technology itself. It's about how do I build all of that? And on top of it, below it, most of these systems are collecting data. And you know, most anybody who might be listening to this knows that everybody wants to be a data-driven organization. How do I pull all that together and make sure that it's useful to our organization in all the ways we have to use it? So it's a completely different challenge than saying, you know, we've got to hire somebody who knows Microsoft, because that doesn't make them a leader of a technology department anymore. That's one tiny piece of a monstrous strategy of what we're going to do with technology and how we're going to drive our organization forward.
Well, and I think a key theme that I'm hearing is leading any team isn't just about technicals. If I have command of Microsoft, that does not make me an IT departmental leader. It doesn't make me a CIO. It just makes me someone that knows that particular technical function. So if you can, speak to kind of that role, that interpersonal role, the role of interpersonal skills, and let's apply that for a moment to actual projects. What do the really effective IT leaders do that the ones that struggle don't, and vice versa?
Okay. Yeah, I'll let me use an example here. So let's say we want to implement a new system. Well, and I'll use something that deals. It's a big deal for most Native American organizations, or pretty much everybody, right? They decide we're going to move all of our collaboration, email, and some of our security systems out to the cloud. It's great, but we haven't done that in the past. So in order to make this happen, I have to, first of all, obtain all the funding. I have to get all of my legal people to understand what it is putting our data outside of our organization out into the cloud. I have to talk about all of the use cases and training for every single department, because everybody uses email and everyone's got to be retrained. I have got to figure out a plan of action to sell this, the cost, the ongoing cost, because I'm moving from not to get too technical in this, but a capital outlay to an operational model where I'm paying month to month rather than once every 3 to 5 years, making a capital outlay to do this. So there's financial components, there's people components, there's strategic components, there's all of those pieces. And on top of it, I have to be able to walk into an executive boardroom and in non-technical terms, have a conversation with the other business leaders and explain why this makes sense, why it's a good idea, why we need to be doing it, and explain it to them. Communicating, understanding how they understand it is more important than me giving them a bunch of unnecessary details, because the end game is I need this organization to move forward with this and feel comfortable with it. So I've got to have all of those communication skills, all the financial skills, all the strategic and other types of pieces put together. Not everybody has that skill set. Not everybody wants to have that skill set. So you really have to kind of understand if that's really for you, because that to be, a leader at that level today, that is where you're spending your time. That's what makes you successful or not successful. It's not that you really understand how to program something or that you're really good with a database. That's not going to get you anywhere as a CIO leader. That's a skill set we need in the team, not leading the team necessarily. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, I think so. And what that sparks for me is this idea of what to outsource. And I'm curious what you've seen success rate from organizations doing maybe a large implementation project like you're talking about. Is it, I guess my guess would be it's more helpful to have the emotional intelligence, conceptual reasoning, communication skill in-house and outsource the technical skill. That's probably less expensive and more sustainable versus vice versa. But have you seen it work either way? And Like, what are those primary components that you want to make sure you have ready before you make a lift of that size?
So the way I look at this, and the way I would recommend most people look at it, is when you're outsourcing, you have to look at a couple of things. First, you have to look at your own capabilities, of course. That's the first piece. But on top of that, even if you're capable of doing something, doesn't mean you should be doing it. Email is a fantastic example because it's one that most people either have just transitioned or they are transitioning it. In the Native American world, they haven't all moved to Office 365 or other cloud-based pieces. So when we talk to a lot of organizations, they'll be like, well, we've always done it this way. That's how we've done it, right? So we have email. They have basically several $100,000 worth of email servers, and they're sitting in their own server room, and they're trying to back them up in the evenings or do whatever. But every time they fail, the only thing worse than a gaming system or any other system is having the email go down for your organization. It's all hands on deck. It's a painful operation. And when you think about it, you're in the health business or you're in the gaming and hospitality business. You're not in the email business. Why are you putting all these resources into email? Email is just a service that you can get out there publicly. Better, cheaper, right? Why are you expending these resources? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Is this a core to what we do? It's a service, but I can get a lot of services, right? Cell phones are there, but I don't have to have my own cell phone network, right? I understand I can consume these pieces. So there's tools we use, and then there's things that are core to your business. You want to spend your resources, your technology resources, on things that are core to your business, that are going to grow your business or organization and provide better service. If they're not, you should always look at whether it makes more sense for me to outsource those services. And that's the direction I'd send anybody when it comes to that. I think that's important that you have to do that. And people are starting to learn that with security now. Security is the same thing. That's sort of the new piece where can you really provide 24/7 constant monitoring effectively? Is it effective? Or is it better to use companies that are already resourced to do this and provide that? That's a difficult thing because you're protecting your business. It is a service. It's an important service, just like email and just like cell phones and other things. So it's a step for people to go, I can do that. It is something I should be looking at. But when it comes to technology, that's probably it. It's okay. First of all, can I do it or can I do it cost effectively? And if I can, is it core to my business? Is this something that we do that drives our business forward? And is it really what we're trying to do? Anyways, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I want to kind of bring this home. Chris, any last questions or kind of takeaways for you? What are you hearing?
Well, just, it rings true. Just like a business is really people, not product. The product is the means through which we transact. Leadership is applying across the spectrum. And whether I'm leading an IT department or leading a gaming ops department or leading a hotel or leading healthcare recruitment, the leadership principles and the ability to connect and inspire and motivate, it doesn't change, right? And so technical competency will only take us so far. There has to be a leadership component to effectively deploying IT resources and continuing to enhance the capacity of organizations to produce. Mike and Kate, unless you know of one, do you know of any like cloud-based leadership solutions that we can go and deploy, or is that still an inside job?
Yeah, that is for the most part. I mean, there's learning that piece it takes time, right? And it's a transition. It's a transition for every organization for certain.
Yeah, and I'll say that's my takeaway that I'm hearing is this idea that building community, it's almost like a Russian nesting doll in my mind. So, Mike, hearing your story about working for Tribal Enterprise and, the enterprise exists to resource a community. And that's true. And also a large implementation project or any sort of change management project. The role of a leader in some ways is building a community with a shared belief about what is the future going to look like. And yeah, we might be doing it by implementing a new software and training people on it, but that's an exercise in building a community with a shared approach and shared values. And I'm just, that I see it another level of the nesting doll is this community that you've built through TribalHub and your other pursuits of folks who are all doing similar things, and how do we support one another and stay connected with one another to really protect one another from missteps and to create shared wisdom that is greater than any one person that's there. So, Mike, last question is, when you look to the future, what do you think is coming for TribalHub, and maybe long-term, but also what's coming up this year that you think people should know about and could be beneficial and helpful for folks to get plugged into?
Sure. First, if anybody's listening out there whose organization isn't a member of what we're doing, you should take a look at that. I think figure out what some of the benefits are. We'd be happy to talk to you about, myself or some of the team about it. There's just a lot of information. We talked about some of the things with connectivity, but over 20 some years, we've put together an awful lot of info on what other organizations are doing, how they're doing it, some of the best practices, all of those pieces. So we have that. And each year we have our TribalNet conference. So TribalNet is the original organization that sort of grew into TribalHub and all the different services we provide now. But our annual event is still called TribalNet, and that's this year in September in Reno, September 12th through the 15th. Got it on my screen sitting over here, so I actually remember it. But that brings, tribes together from across the nation. When I say tribes, and we're talking technology, I think the biggest piece here, one of the biggest takeaways is, we have a leadership advisory board because leaders are critical to where you're going with technology. No matter how strong a CIO type or IT director, whatever your title is for your head person for technology, they cannot get there without the leadership understanding and supporting where they need to go, the value of what needs to happen. So we've got a very large group representing an awful lot of tribes and growing every year that are attending our events that understand I've got to get way more involved in this, because our success, as we talked about, our success and my own success and where I'm going to go is dependent on how well I understand technology and how comfortable I am talking about it and working with the team here in my organization to make sure we're going in the right direction. So all of those pieces are there, and we put those together. And also, I want to touch really quickly. There's just while we've got people on here, the Tribal-ISAC piece. So if you don't mind, I'm going to throw something in about that.
Yeah, go for it.
The Tribal-ISAC is another group that we helped form this last year. It's not a part of TribalHub, but it is a not-for-profit group. It is all about security. So security, cybersecurity risks. There's been a lot, not only threats, but there's been a lot of tribes that have faced ransomware or other types of issues this last year. So this group, very closely associated with all the tribes, their security teams, and we're just sharing information because what we're finding is, like in any community, once the bad guys, the threat actors out there figure out how to perpetrate something against one Native American organization, the likelihood of them trying to do this over and over again at other tribes that's continued to happen. So by sharing information, we're able to mitigate that a lot more. So Tribal-ISAC is another thing that I would recommend people take a look at. And, we can share the website and other thing for that. I don't know if I need to say it on here or if I will give that to people, but it is tribalisac.org. And there's also tribalhub.com. So you can learn a lot more at those sites.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll put those in the show notes. And I know we're really excited to hang out with Mike at TribalNet in Reno in September. So, if you want to get a 2-for-1 and connect with Mike and us, you can see us there. But Chris, how would folks get a hold of us?
Yeah. Please visit our website at purposeandperformancegroup.com or find us, any one of us individually, on your favorite social channel. We're all on LinkedIn and readily available, here to help. And as you stare down possible IT implementations and new capacities as we start to look towards 2023 budgets, I'm more than happy to be a sounding board and maybe help you identify some of those big rocks that you might need to move out of the way, leveraging the leadership capacities within your own organization in order to make certain those implementations go smoothly. So always a joy to connect with Mike. Thank you so much for being on today, and look forward to seeing you again in September.
Yeah, terrific. Nice talking to both you gentlemen too. So good to see Luke and Chris, and enjoyed it today. A little reminiscing about the past and how we got things started. It's always fun.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. And the last call out I'll make here is that TribalHub does have a great podcast series where they talk about technology specific issues in depth with lots of great guests. And I would encourage you to check them out. So iTunes, wherever else you get your podcast, TribalHub, if you search that in, it'll come up. And thanks everyone so much for listening today, and hope you have an amazing day, week. Go out there, be intentional, make it happen.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo, and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love, available on Apple Music. And this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.